it and do something about it every day.
Thank you, Senator O'Sullivan. Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Today our Senate Select Committee into the Abbott government's budget cuts heard from an organisation called Reclink Australia. Reclink Australia was one of the organisations behind the Choir of Hard Knocks, a choir made up of people in our community who are homeless and have complex needs, including mental health issues. The ABC filmed this choir as it got together, rehearsed and began to sing, ultimately doing public performances and producing a CD. And they have some beautiful songs on that CD. It's one of the proudest in my collection. The documentary was riveting and their singing was truly beautiful. And what we learnt today is a tragedy. The committee heard that the Abbott government wrecking ball has hit this vital community support program and cut its funding from 1 July this year. Reclink Australia receives very little in funding from the federal government. In fact, you could say small change in a federal budget context, just $560,000, $500,000 per year. But without any warning, no reviews, no analysis, no inquiry, Reclink Australia lost its funding on 1 July 2014. And the shame of it is I doubt that the Abbott government really knows what they've lost. Reclink Australia, from their annual report, aims to enhance the lives of people experiencing disadvantage or facing significant barriers to participation through providing new and unique sport and arts opportunities and specialist recreational programs. Reclink Australia targets some of the country's most vulnerable and isolated people, at-risk youth, those experiencing mental illness, people with disability, the homeless, people tackling alcohol and other drug issues, and social and economic hardship. Reclink works in partnership with over 380 community, government and private organisations. Reclink's mission is to respond, rebuild, reconnect. They seek to give all participants the power of purpose. In the last financial year, Reclink delivered over 115,000 sport, recreation and arts participation opportunities. Its benefits to individuals is immeasurable, and I'd urge senators to read their annual report, which is full of stories about recovery, personal stories about reconnecting and ultimately about well-being. Today at our Senate Select Committee we heard evidence from Brian, who bravely told his story. Brian had drug and alcohol issues and said at 35 his life was washed up. He'd wrecked his life. Brian was attending the 12 Steps program when he was invited to attend a football game where the Salvo's Hawks were playing. Brian told the committee recovery is tough, particularly when you're doing it on your own. He ended up umpiring the first time he went to footy. He liked that because he earned some money, and he liked that because he was broke. But Brian said the Salvo's Hawks had players who were just like him, who'd had or were working on other demons in their own lives. There was no pretence, and Brian told the committee that there was too much of a gap for him to join any other club, as his self-esteem was low. But he went back, partly because he got paid to umpire, but also because it gave Brian a purpose, one day a week, doing a good job. And as Brian said, and I quote, "I was one of them. I knew it was possible, and I was feeling better. Reclink provided me with a purpose. Failure was not an option anymore. I had many people supporting me, and Brian proved to himself he could do the tough stuff." Brian went on to compete in the Hawaii Marathon, one of the toughest things he's ever done, and he continues today to train and participate in marathons. He has and continues to work with the disadvantaged in our community and now works for Reclink. Reclink Australia is modelled on the very successful long-running Victorian program. This program has been running for 24 years. Peter Cullen, the founder and former president, told the committee that there is a lot in welfare that stops people drowning but doesn't teach them to swim. Reclink Australia bridges that gap. Mr Cullen said Reclink stopped people falling deeper and deeper into isolation. He said Reclink can reach people that others can't. Indeed, Brian told the committee of a participant who told him he'd been contemplating suicide early one morning, but knew that the bus was coming to pick him up at around 11 a.m. and that the game he was going to play was something to look forward to. And of course, after training and being with others, this gentleman was on a high and safe again. Reclink is one of a number of organisations who've been cut by the Abbott government. There are other programs which won't have the funds to continue. Good programs, life-saving programs, programs that connect to the most disadvantaged in our community, the most disadvantaged in our community. And you would think that a caring government would not cut these organisations, but we have seen time and time again in this place that the Abbott government doesn't care. It cuts and cuts and cuts simply for the sake of it. I doubt, as I said earlier, the Abbott government really understands what it's cut when it cut the funding to Reclink. Youth Connections is just one organisation like Reclink who, without warning, have had their funding chopped too. And come December, the Youth Connection programs right across Australia will cease to exist. And this is a travesty. These are inexpensive programs to run and they have a massive success rate. Over 80% of successful participation by young people back into education or back into employment. This is not a program to cut. And like Reclink, it bridges a gap. There's a gap out there and it's filling a need. When we heard from Brian today, his heartfelt story, it was truly amazing, and you could see the opportunity that Reclink gave him, the opportunity it gave him to restart his life. And yet we've just seen the Abbott government slash this program. There was some consultation with them when they were told, well, we're not sure where you fit, whether you fit in mental health or whether you fit here or there, but that isn't the reason you cut a program. Without any review, no analysis, no consultation, simply advise that come 1 July you won't be getting your just over $500,000 funding anymore. Now, why would you cut a program like that, that is working, that's providing opportunity and purpose? And we hear from the Abbott government day in, day out about purpose. And clearly Reclink is a program which provides purpose. But nevertheless, it's been on the chopping block, it's lost its funding, and it is time for the Abbott government to start to see sense about its harsh, cruel budget. In fact, it is long overdue for the Abbott government to reconsider its harsh, cruel measures. We've seen many of these measures fail to get through the Senate. It is time for the Abbott government to reflect on the sorts of budget cuts it's put in place. It is time for the Abbott government to realise and to own up that it made a mistake with Youth Connections, that it made a mistake with Reclink. These are not expensive programs. They fill a real need in our communities. They give real purpose to those who've lost their way, and nothing will replace them once they go. And that's the crime of it. Nothing will replace them. When December comes and Youth Connections loses its funding, there's nothing there. And it's simply not true to suggest that Job Services Australia can somehow fulfil this need. It cannot. So these are programs worthy of funding, and it is time for the Abbott government to face up to facts that its harsh, cruel budget has gone too far, and to immediately reconsider funding Reclink, it's $500,000 a year, and to refund Youth Connections. Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President.
Thank you, Senator Lyons.